So I really made it clear from them to the start that leadership and adding value above and beyond as being an individual contributor was something that was a core value of mine. Maybe I can try something else. Like, do you want to look back, Bill, when you're 70 and say, what if? Like, yeah, you can stay in this industry and do that and live a good life. And candidly, a lot of people in my network that have that W-2 mentality were like, what are you doing, dude?
Well, Bill, thanks for coming in today. Thanks for jumping into the Engineered Success podcast. I'm excited to unpack a little bit more of your story. I know we've talked a little bit about it already, but really just excited to engage more today.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. It's great. Beautiful space, awesome venue, and happy to be here.
And the sun's out today. And it's March Madness. So
it is.
Sounds like there's a lot of the good things going for us today.
Yeah. Michigan got a big win last night. Sparty's on tonight at 10 o'clock. And all is well with the world.
Good. Well, let's start the story at the very beginning for you. So can you tell me a little bit about your upbringing, your childhood, and, kind of way back to when you were young?
Yeah. So I grew up in Taylor, Michigan, southeast Michigan. A lot of folks, refer to it as downriver. Very blue collar town. My dad, all my uncles and most of my family really worked at General Motors. That was kind of the path, the track. For me, I was the first person on either side, my mom's side or my dad's side, to graduate from college. So I think having that sort of blue collar mentality is something that's definitely shaped me. It's been an important part of my life and a great place for me to grow up.
And growing up, were you an only child or did you have some siblings?
No, I've got a sibling. Yeah, younger brother. Yeah, 3 years younger. So we were competitors and friends and played sports in the backyard and neighbors and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, one brother.
Okay, one brother. And did you spend a lot of time beating him at everything, considering you're 3 years older, right? Or did he hold his own?
Back and forth. There definitely was that sibling rivalry, and I would say, kind of those peak teen years, it got a little bit of animosity, but we're on the other side of that now. We've got a great relationship. We share a love of Michigan sports, especially Michigan football, and we still catch up and talk quite a bit. And yeah, so it was good. Right. It was a healthy competition, I think.
Yeah.
Competition's always a good thing.
Yeah. It always helps you achieve a little bit more, push a little bit harder, sharpen each other up. So definitely exciting to hear that you had that opportunity to engage in that as a young adult. And you mentioned that you got into college, but even before that, I'm curious, what were some of the things, if you think way back, you're playing basketball, you're playing football, you were enjoying time with your brother, you were getting competitive, but what were some of your biggest interests at that stage of life?
Yeah, I would say when I was young, definitely sports were a big piece, but, sort of a calling for me had always been the outdoors. So I love to hunt and fish. I've got property here in Michigan. I hit the rivers. I have a boat. I chase salmon and steelhead. I do all that. I got a little bit of that from my dad and his brothers, and I think maybe some of that was like, wow, they're going to do that. They're taking a trip to Tennessee to fish for smallmouth, or they're going on the Detroit River to fish for walleye. And I think there was that want, need to be part of that community. But, even after I got older and my dad sort of lost interest, my brother didn't have interest, I stayed connected with guys in high school. I got a boat when I turned 16. I'd go fishing with buddies. So, beyond sports, I think the outdoors were always kind of an important thing for me. And it's really served me well, I think, now in this sort of fall season of my life. Staying connected to the outdoors is a place to kind of get centered, slow things down and really get reconnected with Mother Earth, if you will.
Yeah, I love that you said fall season of your life.
It is.
We'll dive deeper into that because we're right at the spring season, right? And diving into what you are learning, what you're thinking about when it comes to your future. And sometimes you just aren't sure, right? Yeah. And you're just exploring different things. You're asking different types of people for advice. It sounded like you spent some time fishing with your father. Who are some of the people during that age of your life that you were learning from or asking questions to?
Yeah, honestly, I really think about like the inflection point of my life and kind of what shaped things. And I definitely would say like my dad was my hero in a lot of ways. So when I was 5 years old, my parents got divorced. And but the great thing about the story is when I turned 10, they got remarried. My dad had a substance abuse problem. As I said earlier, he worked at General Motors, and it was really the union and the way that GM was set up that saved his job. He had substance abuse problem, and the union saved his job, and he was able to pay it forward. He had his why, which were his boys. He got sober. He remarried my mom, and full circle, the EAPs, the employee assistant program professionals that helped my dad, he actually became the EAP for the plant and was helping the people that had those issues that were at the plant. So it was a complete full circle. So to see somebody come back from that type of, challenge in their life, I was playing with house money. You know what I mean? I was just like, I can do anything, and I think both of my parents, not just my dad, but my mom also instilled in me that, I could do whatever I wanted to do, that I was special, and special not in a way that I was better or different than everybody, but we all have something inside of us. And if we can kind of tap into that and follow our true north and kind of listen to our heart, we can really do anything that we want to do. And that's kind of like where I'm at now in this fall season. And, we'll get into I.E. mindset, but yeah, that's what I'm trying to do to help others as well.
I love that.
Yeah.
Even just comment about true north. And I think what I'm trying to piece together is during this early stages in your spring season of life, you're young, you're trying to figure out what that true north is, and you're experimenting and with different conversations you're having with people, and they're pouring into you different ideas of, hey, you should go do this, oh, you could go try and do this, and you're seeing your father overcome obstacles in life, and you're like, okay, I can actually go do hard things, right? What were some of those early on high school time frame things that you were thinking, hey, this is what I'm going to be when I grow up?
Yeah. I mean, so I went to community college for a couple years, ended up going to Central Michigan, and I was actually on track to go back after my undergrad to go to grad school. And my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife of 25 years, became pregnant. And so at that point in time, it was time to be responsible. And you talk about why and things that you needed to do. And I remember, going back to my parents' house and explain what was happening. And my dad just kind of clapped his hands with a big smile. And he's like, what are you going to do now, son? It's just like, you're not going back to school. You got a future wife and a family to support. And so, I started my hero's journey, if you will, into my career and sales and those things to make sure that my family was taken care of, that my wife was able to stay home with our daughter, Haley. And yeah, so that was a big inflection point. Relative, if I think about inflection points, I think about that early sort of spring season, that 5 to 10, kind of that summer season when I was starting my hero's journey, being a young man at 23 with a wife and family, and sort of now where I'm at as I transition into my fall. So.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, and how that was a turning point in kind of, okay, shoot, I've got to step up. I've got to make some changes. As you thought through and had that conversation with your dad about you need to make some changes, what were some of those things that came to your mind right away? It's like, okay, I can no longer be, but now I need to be.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing was just that career track and the ability to provide a home and a living. And that wasn't going to be the path of going back to grad school and trying to figure it out. Now, the great thing at the time was my wife is a super talented person. She had a job with Philip Morris, company car. Like she was really doing well for herself. But I wasn't going to just say, I'm going to be the guy to go back to grad school while you provide for all of us. And it worked out great. A couple years later, she was able to kind of walk away to stay full time at home with her daughter and eventually with our son. And I was kind of able to be that breadwinner of the family, which I took a lot of pride in. It might be kind of traditional, and it's not necessarily for everybody, but for us, it worked. So,
and how did you pick what that first career path that after it's not grad school? What am I going to do?
Yeah,
like how did you determine that?
Great question. So we were still at Central Michigan. My wife had the Mount Pleasant territory, and we needed to be close to each other in proximity. I was set to go to grad school, and it was the summer. And so all of a sudden, you didn't go through the career program of all of the interviews like all my buddies did with pharmaceutical or wherever they got jobs at. So I had to look around in the community and say, mid-Michigan, Mount Pleasant, where am I going to go? And there was an ad in the paper. So talking about ads back then, right? At a car dealership for a salesperson. And I went in and I'm like, look, I didn't go to college to just be, I'm not downgrading. I mean, it's a great living to sell cars, but they had this job, finance and insurance manager. And I was like, and it's like, you get people financed, you learn about interest rates, you sell insurance, warranties. It was just a little bit more. Plus it wasn't all commission. There was a base salary. And it ended up being the guy was from Detroit and downriver. We knew some people, and he's like, look, kid, he's just like, you're wet behind the ears. You just graduated. You got 90 days. And I can tell you what, Stephen, it's like when you got 90 days with the back against the wall with a wife that's pregnant with a child, you figure it out. And I stayed there for 5 years. It was a great learning experience. And when you talk about sales skills and those types of things, it's retail, and in that industry, I learned a lot.
Yeah, and how did you figure it out in 90 days? I guess there's multiple different potential answers to that, but was it people within the organization that poured into you that you were able to just be curious and ask questions around? Did you have to go and get books? Kind of what was your path to success over those 90 days?
Yeah, I think so. It was fortunate. The guy that I went to work for, they had a kind of a conglomerate of dealerships, and there were other finance and insurance managers at the other stores. One thing I'm big on, and really tell my kids and anybody I come in contact with at a young age, it's like about network and about learning from other people. Like I joined a mastermind, those types of things. I reached out to those folks, right? Hey, how are you doing this? How are you averaging this rate on your warranties? How are you converting this? Those types of things. And then besides that, it was just showing up on time, doing the work, showing that it was important. And, sometimes if you don't have the knowledge, that's one thing, but if you got the grit, the work ethic and the why, and I had the why, you make it happen.
Yeah. That why definitely, means a lot.
Yep.
And if you don't have it, sometimes it's easy to be like, well, it's okay, I'll try again next time.
Right.
But if you don't have that option, you got to make it happen and maybe add a little bit of confidence in your step to go ask questions that made you uncomfortable. Were you confident at that point in life? Like, were you confident to go and ask someone, hey, I don't know this, can you help me?
Yeah, that's never been a problem for me. I mean, even with the launch of my business a little bit over 60 days in, certainly have an offering and those types of things. But the biggest thing for me is to network with individuals that are already doing it and saying, hey, this is kind of what I'm thinking. This is sort of my go-to-market strategy. These are my offerings. Like, what do you think? Does that make sense? And that, for a lot of people, they don't want to show any type of vulnerability. And to me, it's just kind of like, I mean, let me just be candid and honest. And so yeah, I think, being confident in who you are, but also reaching out and being vulnerable they're important things, so.
Did you always believe that? Was it always easy for you to be open and ask for help and to have those, or is that something you learned throughout life?
I learned it from my parents. I mean, honestly, going back to being 5 to 10, once my dad kind of got sober and we became a family unit again, it was about communication, no secrets. If you have a problem, if you have an issue, let's talk about it. We had family meetings every week. How did the week go? How are you doing? Those types of things. So just being open and honest with your feelings and communicating has just been something that, I think I don't know how much is genetically in me, but certainly environmentally, from what I learned from my parents, was a big part of, who we were as a family. And it's kind of, progressed into adulthood and how I operate in my family unit as well.
Love it.
Yeah.
And you've seen the impacts of not being open and honest. And then when that changed, this was the new norm, and you appreciated that new norm versus the old norm and kind of said, this is the way that people need to communicate.
That's right. And you can have breakthroughs. You can change your story. You know what I mean? Because the reason that my dad had the issues that he did, and we don't have to go through all of those things from his childhood, but they didn't talk about it. It was put away. You weren't able to really acknowledge how you felt. So what did you do? You did other things to sort of numb those feelings or deal with those feelings. And instead, let's get them on the table. Let's talk about them. So we don't have to use other vehicles to figure out what those emotions mean. Let's talk about them.
So that process of being honest and being vulnerable with things that you didn't know in those first 90 days at the dealership allowed you just to move faster, right? Would you say that? It allowed you to move faster?
That's a great take home. Absolutely.
Okay. And one thing that I'm curious about is those individuals that you went and talked to and you had conversations with, were they willing to engage with you? Or still kind of like, no, this is my trade secret. I'm not telling this kid.
I think there's a secret sauce because, I mean, our numbers were published against each other. So, it's a very competitive area, right? He's averaging this copy on that. I think it's all in the way that you frame it up. And, for a young kid at 23, I think I had this self-awareness and a little bit of maturity with what was going on in my life to say, if I'm going to reach out to Steve, who's at XYZ dealership and he's doing well, how do I frame it up that I'm just like the young kid and my wife's pregnant at home and I'm just trying to make it and I got 90 days. And would you be open-minded to just telling me how, because I see how well you're doing. I mean, I think it's one thing to how you approach people and how you frame it for them and how they see you. And are you threatening or not? Like, hey, I plan on coming in and taking over the top spot at all the dealerships. So put you on notice. So tell me how you're doing it so I can do it better. Well, you know, so it's all about hat in hand and just being vulnerable and just trying to get better. And so I think that's, you know, if you're going to show up and do things and then try to add value. I mean, I'm trying to do that now. It's like, you know, even talking with you and this podcast and what we're doing, I think this is awesome. But I always want to look through it as a lens of like, also, what can I do to help Steven in his business too? You know what I mean? So not that I had a ton to give as a 23-year-old kid, but, you know.
Well, I think in some of those scenarios too, and if you were the type of person that's curious and asking questions and then they're giving you advice, sometimes in mentorship, what I've noticed is that sometimes all you have to give is to show that individual that you are going to do what they say. And so you just go execute on it. And then they're like, you did what I said. And then look, and then so you're the best testimonial for them because you can say, hey, I did what this guy told me. He gave me great advice. Look what I've been able to achieve because of him.
Yeah.
And that's just a good way to give back to them too. But they're not going to give you any more advice if you don't take it and do something with it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, stop asking me questions.
Right.
You don't ever take any advice I give you anyway. So you're at this phase, you're hustling, you're learning kind of that whole dealership environment.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me a little bit about that after those first 90 days.
Yeah. So, you know, kind of got in the throes of it and then, you know, was enjoying it and enjoyed the sales process and the environment and really was starting to come to a crossroads where I was working with the owner who was a younger owner. You know, he was in his mid 40s at the time. He spent all of his time downriver Detroit. That was our connection, how we knew each other. And they had this, you know, conglomerate of dealerships and they were looking to buy more. And I saw myself as like, hey, I want to go run a store. Like, I want to become a general manager. I want to become a partial owner. I wanted to do all those things. And I think kind of the turning point, candidly, was it was just by chance. I had won a trip. It was 9/11. We were together. We were out in Montana. And long story short, 9/11 and the car business for me from 1998 when I started to 2001 was kind of a great period. And after 9/11, it was like 0% financing, became very, you know, competitive. And it just was a situation where it wasn't fun anymore. And it wasn't that it was tougher, but it was just time for me. You know what I mean? I'd spent 5 years there and it was a great ride. I learned a lot, but I felt like there was something else calling me. You know what I mean? There was something else out there waiting for me. And I didn't want to continue. So the aspiration of owning my own store, running my own store, that was gone. And I'm a kind of a growth mindset guy. So it's like, okay, what's next?
When you were looking at the aspiration of running your own store, when you think about it, why did you want it in the first place?
You know, probably in my mind, if I'm being candid, there's probably a part of ego there. I think ego, I saw the Eckhart Tolle out there, you know, I'm reading his book and, you know, I think that's a lot that drives a lot of us. I think that's a part of it. But for me too, I think it's like strategy and leadership and leading people and competition and those types of things. It's hard to really articulate it, Steven, but yeah, it's, I think it was kind of all of those things, but I learned that wasn't going to provide me with the fulfillment, that I think that I was looking for, even if it was deemed as successful. It just, I needed something else.
So what was that other thing? You changed direction.
Yeah. So, you know, I was really trying to break in. So at that time, that's 2004, what was really popular amongst my friends, my, you know, kind of colleagues and folks that I graduated from was like pharmaceutical sales. Go to work at Pfizer, you know, you're selling to docs, you got a budget, you got a company car, money-wise was decent. It was probably almost similar to what I was doing in insurance, you know, F&I, but so I was trying to break into that, and candidly, I was like the car sales guy. So like trying to talk to recruiters or apply for jobs at Pfizer, it's like, you're doing finance and insurance like in Clare, Michigan. And I'm like, you know, I'm having your people come try to sell what I'm selling, you know? And it just so happened, back to what you say that you love, I was up north steelhead fishing and we had already had our house for sale. We were moving to Grand Rapids and ran across a guy that said there was an opening in medical device. And there's kind of a little bit of a differentiation from a sales perspective relative to medical device sales versus pharmaceutical.
Yes.
And I'm like, okay, and got the interview, and long story short, took that job and spent 20 years in that industry. And it was a great ride.
So did you have to take a similar type of approach when you got into med device sales that you had to take when you were in the automotive area?
So literally, and this is true, a great kind of, wouldn't say mentor, but a colleague. We worked together for a long time. Jerry Prather hired me in 2004 in June. And he was like, look, I just became a manager. All right. You're the car dealership guy. When I went to go to corporate to interview, it was like, why are you sending us this guy? He's calling me. I flew to Mansfield, Massachusetts, and he's like, look, they're not super happy with your background. So you need to show out, dude. So got the job, whatever, but it was the same thing. Look, you're going to go through training. This is like kind of like the same 90-day period. If you screw it up, like, you're gone. And again, it's like, we left Beale City, Michigan. We bought a house in Rockford, mortgage, 2 kids now, bigger mortgage, back against the wall, need to make it happen. And, it worked out pretty good. So having somebody push you and having fear can be an unbelievable thing if utilized the right way.
So there's a saying around burn the ships or something like that. You don't.
The boats were burned.
Yeah,
the boats were burned.
You don't have a choice.
Yeah.
And similar approach then for you, ask good questions, find people that were, you mentioned he was kind of a mentor, but find people that'll pour into you, show them that you can actually take action on what they're saying. Were there other things that you had to dive into to research, like books or other things at that phase in life, or not yet?
Yeah, it was pretty straightforward. They had a great training process. You did, it was about a 3-month period. It was field sales training for a week where you'd take tests. You'd be back in your territory. You'd work that. Then there was advanced corporate training where you were gone for a month at a time, and you were tested along the way. And it's like, it's a pass fail. And you've got colleagues that are going through, you got your field sales trainers. And if you don't know what you're learning, you have questions, you better utilize those trainers. They become kind of like your, de facto mentors. And I utilized every resource that I had. So
was this mostly a commission role?
So it was 50-50, the way that it was structured, base with sort of at plan or on target earnings. And then there was a capital component to it too. So there was another way to kind of pull a lever to really accelerate earnings.
So usually to hit those on targets, it takes some time, right? You got to get into the reps. You got to learn, the tricks. You got to find your own secret sauce per se, which can make it difficult during those early times, So there were probably times when you got up, you're like, okay, this is tough. This isn't easy. This is something where I have to do it. What were some of those mindset things, or how did you convince yourself to get up and make those things happen?
I tell you what, it was a big transition because I went through training, and then when the rubber hit the road, I was used to a retail environment where I showed up to an office, customers came in, bought a car. I did the finance and insurance, meaning the leads came to me. Now it was working out of my office, nobody telling me where to go, $2 million territory, 10% uplift. You got to grow by $200,000. Your annual quote is 2.2 million. You got a year to do it, and you get paid commissions monthly. Good luck. And there was no GPS. It was like MapQuest. You know what I mean? And about 2 months into it, I was like really contemplated going back and trying to get a job at a dealership, because I was so uncomfortable, Stephen. The autonomy and the time management skills and the things that you need to do going from retail to a medical device sales job when your territory is half the state of Michigan and the Upper Peninsula takes a lot of discipline. And my wife was a great advocate for me. She kept me on track and believed in me, and I didn't give up. But there were some times where I questioned myself. I was just, like I said, super uncomfortable. It was tough, but it worked out. I stayed the course, and yeah. So
one of the things that's like you give up sometimes too soon, and if things are tough, you sometimes just need to push your way through it, and it turns out. How long did that take for you to really feel like you were hitting the stride and hitting that OT?
Yeah, so it worked out great. It was a couple of months of adversity, calling those couple of trainers that I knew that I could call and say, dude, like, help me out here, man. I'm struggling, candidly. Like, this is what I'm used to. I'm going to these hospitals. I thought, like, just because I worked and I had these devices that the nurses and the docs were going to want to talk to me. it was like stiff arm, you know what I mean? And they talked me through, and it actually worked out great. Had some great relationships. My number one account was Spectrum Health, and Randy Sportel and Fred Gill. They're both retired from Spectrum now, but they were my two guys, and they were kind of going through a transition of my number one product, and I actually ended up winning Rookie of the Year that year. So I stayed with it, won Rookie of the Year, and ended up from the car business to my first year in med device, more than doubled my income in 1 year. And that's when it was like, okay, there's something in this industry, because there's all kinds of levers you can pull. It's not just your on-target earnings and your base salary, but there's this capital component. And if I can figure out a value proposition to a large IDN like Spectrum Health and say, hey, you're doing business this way, you're getting our pumps at no charge and you're buying the disposables. But if we look at buying your pumps and you own the equipment, and we kind of do a different sort of creative business deal, there's an opportunity for you to be more efficient and effective financially and system-wide. And, by default, I've got the potential to earn more money too. And that's what I did. So yeah, it was cool.
No, it's exciting to hear, how you're getting strategic about the impact that you're having in that area, but how it can impact your finances.
Right.
And how you can grow, not just, bare minimum. I assume at that point you're, taking the mortgage, you're paying off all of that. Now you're like, okay, what more can I do with this, right?
Student loan debt. Yep. All that stuff. Yeah.
And so that was a big motivator and exciting thing for you. And now give me that next step. After you kind of hit your stride, you were achieving levels of success there. What was next for you?
Yeah, I always wanted to make sure that I communicated what my goals were to the folks that I work for that started back at the dealership. I wanted them to know that I was motivated. And so when I got hired on as a medical device rep, I was 28 years old at the time. I had 2 kids, a wife that stayed home, and that's really what sold it. Because I told those guys, like, this is my why, and I'm not coming here just to be a rep, but I want to be a regional director. I want to be a VP. I want to have a say in strategy. So I really made it clear from them to the start that leadership and adding value above and beyond as being an individual contributor was something that was a core value of mine. And so that's what I did. And in less than 2 years, I got promoted to a regional director and spent, 10 years sort of at that company, and, finished it as a sort of a VP of health systems, where I was a one point of contact for all of our businesses, the entire portfolio, with like the Midwest strategics like Cleveland Clinic and Beaumont and Spectrum, Ohio State, facilities like that. So
was this the first time that you were in kind of that leadership position where you had people reporting up into you?
Yeah. I mean, the only other experiences I had were sports. Mm-hmm. You had coaches, but I was always, like, even going back to, high school basketball, sometimes they called me the preacher. I was just kind of always the guy in the locker room that was just like, hey guys, let's go. We got this. Or yeah. So it was just, that, kind of motivational piece and lifting people up around you and those types of things. It was, I think, just always something that just came sort of second nature to me. And maybe honestly probably goes back to my childhood a little bit. I had the little brother, parents went through divorce. During that period while they were kind of separated, I felt like I needed to try to, keep things together.
Mm. You took that into your leadership style, mm-hmm. As this regional manager too. And tell me a little bit about how you were able to help that team. Like, did it go well? Were you able to perform? Did you struggle?
Yeah, I think what I struggled with the most was still, it's like you go out, at least in that industry, even when you do ride-alongs, and we had a great process of ride-alongs and time in the field and follow-up. But what you had to understand as a manager is that if every time I went out and rode with you, Stephen, and you were my new rep in Grand Rapids, say you were in my backfill, I just got promoted, and we go into Spectrum Health, if I don't let you fail, if I don't let you communicate, establish a relationship, and learn how to navigate that on your own, I'm only there with you 5% of the time. The other 95%, it's up to you to drive the number that we're sharing together. So at first, it was not being the super rep still, but getting back, having a plan, going in. If they need something, they need you to jump in or be the heavy, that's fine. But I think that was the first part of the transition of just not being the super rep and coach them up. It's about them. It's not about you. You can't sell everything. That was a learning moment relative to, performance and that type of thing.
I attribute this back to, some experiences that I've had in life, maybe in a different scenario, but it's more of like a delegation piece. Like, no one can do it as good as you, Bill. Like, no one can. But you'd have to give people the chance. And once they do, they really step up. And sometimes you step back and you're like, wow, they really took this to the next level, and they can actually do it better in some scenarios. So then those are the best people to manage, best people to lead.
Agreed. Yeah.
So you're working your way up, working your way through the process. Keep telling me what's going on in your world and professionally.
Yeah, so that was great. It was a great time I spent at Covidien, and was kind of with, as a regional director for a while, and then got an opportunity, as I mentioned a minute ago, to sort of become this one point of contact. So we had you think about a hospital, they were buying from my division, which was vascular therapy. We sold an SCD sleeve. It's a leg sleeve that goes on your leg after surgery if you're not ambulatory, to make sure you don't get a blood clot. But Covidien had a ton of products, right? We were, a $10 billion company at the time. So to be this one point of contact, I was sort of like the one point of contact for, if you're at Spectrum, you don't want to deal with 10 different business units and 30 different reps. Mm-hmm. You want to deal with one point of contact. So I did that, but there was a huge acquisition. So a company by the name of Medtronic bought Covidien. Well, at that point in time, I'd only been in that role for a year. That was in 2015. And there was really no longer a need for our business unit. We don't need a one point of contact for the Covidien products because now we're Medtronic. Mm-hmm. So I was riffed. They blew up our organization, and, I was 3 years into the brand new home that I just built, a wife that was staying at home, 2 kids, one that was just in high school, a son, in middle school with college and all of these bills. And I'm telling you, it's a gut check. Mm-hmm. And again, backs against the wall. What are you going to do? And the great thing that I would say and advice for anybody as they go through their career is that, your network is super important. And I made sure that I stayed close with people in the car business. I stayed close with people that I dealt with at the old division, the new division, made those relationships, and was able to land on my feet fairly quickly through somebody that I knew. And candidly, throughout my career over the last 20 years, I've only been to a couple of places, but it's always ended up being directly from somebody I knew that was within my network. So
I love it. Yeah. And the network piece and the ability to leverage that, but also be there for them if they need you. And people really do want to jump out and help each other if they're seeing situations, especially if it's people they know, like, and trust, right? So taking those through the network conversation a little bit deeper, what were some of the intentional things you did to keep relationships and grow new ones?
Yeah. I mean, I think, LinkedIn's a nice tool, making sure that you're reaching out to folks there. And then I think it was just trying to find ways to find common ground on a personal level. That's where it always, like, for people, it wasn't for me, even now, and really look back on it. It's not like I was doing it premeditated, like, hey, I might get riffed in a couple years, so I want to make this connection. It was always like, this guy likes to hunt and fish, and I've got that in common. Or, you know what, he's a huge college football fan, and he's an Ohio State fan, and I'm a Michigan fan, and we've got that, and we got banner, and we're texting about that. Mm-hmm. It was like finding those common ground places on a personal level that I could connect with people and kind of really develop a relationship, not just the professional side. So, and I even did that from a leadership. I mean, it's always a fine line, but I always found that, authenticity and empathy are kind of 2 huge core values of mine, and I think are really big relative to leadership and how you treat your people. And, with what I've done with my new company, I get more out of some of the personal trials and tribulations that I think back that I helped some of my reps through, more than any P club that I got them on the stage for, because that means something. I mean, not that those results don't mean anything. It's monetary, it's great, but those are the things that I really think about, that I hang my hat on,
Yeah, let's unpack a little bit about what you're up to today. Yeah. So you're ready to start talking about
it. Sure, absolutely.
We alluded to a little bit earlier with the fall season that you're in, mm-hmm. and some of the things that you're growing and excited to do, and I'm excited to learn more. So can you tell me a little bit about what you're doing today?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we mentioned about the transition I made from, one company, and there was sort of an acquisition and a downsizing, and I went through another business and kind of did that. And then, about 3 years ago, Stephen, I kind of came to a crossroads where, I was 46 years old at the time. My daughter was graduated and done with school. My son was almost done. My wife and I were looking at being empty nesters. medical device career offered me, sort of a great lifestyle, sort of a nest egg, and put me in a great position to finally maybe act on some of the passions that I had. So, because even going back to 2015, when I went through some transitions, I'd been exploring franchising. I've been exploring starting businesses, but the story that I told myself, in order to maintain this lifestyle, Bill Nash is only capable of earning money as a W-2 employee, right? So now, 2022 was like, maybe I can try something else. Like, do you want to look back, Bill, when you're 70 and say, what if? Like, yeah, you can stay in this industry and do that and live a good life. And candidly, a lot of people in my network that had that W-2 mentality were like, what are you doing, dude? Like, what, and it's like, so the last several years, I've done some consulting, I've done some things on my own, but this past January, it all kind of came together and founded a company called I.E. Mindset Group, Inspire and Empower Mindset. And our mission is to inspire, empower, and transform individuals, teams, and organizations, really allow people and organizations and teams to realize their full potential. And it's kind of 3 pillars: mindset, teamwork, and leadership. A lot of the things that I'm teaching, methodologies are sort of based on my own IP and experience over the last 20 years, but also made some strategic partnerships with a couple of individuals and companies. One is a guy by the name of John Gordon, really well-known author, motivational speaker. He wrote a book called Energy Bus. I'm certified in his content. And then I'm using that kind of on the corporate sales side within my network. But I also have a collaborator and a VP of athletics, a guy by the name of Kevin Guzzo. And we're both certified in mental performance coaching by a guy by the name of Brian Kane. And all of it's really around mindset, leadership, understanding that I can only control, right, the process, not the outcome. So we're like 60 some days in, out networking, talking to that sort of athletic vertical and commercial sales vertical, and really just trying to offer up our services to help organizations and individuals grow.
I love it.
Exciting.
Yeah, I love it. And I love the topics and even the name. And as you get into mindset, I'm curious to dive into a couple stories from your past. You mentioned it's pulling on, 20, 25 years of experience. Yeah. And what are some stories that you can give of examples where mindset, mental toughness, kind of those scenarios have helped you overcome? Do you have any of those that you could share?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest one was really just the 2 from a career perspective. I mean, we talked about the personal ones with, the adversity I faced as a younger kid or, early on after I graduated. But I think looking back with career and where you're at, you're going to face adversity, and maybe it's a riff, it's a downsizing. Maybe it's going to be a situation where you started a business and things aren't going well. And I think it comes back to, self-belief and who you are, and really, honestly, not to sound all woo-woo, but it's about living from a place of abundance and gratitude and love, as opposed to a place of fear and worry and scarcity. And, I think things like law of vibration and law of frequency are a real thing. And I think your words are powerful. So if I wake up today, like my word this year is believe. If I wake up today and say, boy, I don't know what question Steven's going to ask me. I hope that I don't screw that up. I hope I can articulate myself in the right way, or I can get up and say, I expect great things today. I trust in God's plan for me. I accept all the people that want to come into my life and work with me and my company. Like those types of that thought process, I think it's, that's the mindset right there. How we see the world, the frame that we look through. And it's like a mirror, right? I mean, you look into a mirror, if you write something on your face and the mirror is showing you got something on the face, you can't change the mirror. You have to change yourself. That make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, love that. Thanks for walking through it. I know that sometimes that's hard, right?
Yes.
Sometimes it's not easy to wake up in the morning and say those types of things to yourself, because sometimes you got to deal with some pretty tough stuff, whether you're in business ownership or just, in family situations, or just, you just are in a situation that's going to be hard.
Yeah.
And it is tough to go through and have some of those conversations with yourself and convince yourself of those scenarios, right? I personally have experienced the power of habits and getting into certain types of habits that have allowed that conversation, internally to be a little bit easier. What are some habits that you've been able to tack on into your routines throughout life?
Yeah, 10,000 steps a day, MyFitnessPal with my diet, so I think diet, exercise, what you do, kind of those above the line, below the line behaviors. And I actually use an app called Habit Share, share with my son. Our mental performance coach, Kevin Guza, that I talked about, he shares it with our athletes. It's what's my goal? What do I want to do? How am I going to get there? And if I'm going to get there, it can't just be in my mind. I need to put it on paper. I need to have it on an app, and I need to have an accountability partner to go along with it. So, I mean, that's one tangible way to make sure that you're defining what you want to do, how you're going to get there, and you're holding yourself accountable, and you're even connecting with other folks to make sure that they're holding you accountable, accountability partners. That's what we do in large teams. So we'll take, a team of, maybe a large Division II baseball team with 25 or 30 kids. We'll put them in kind of like groups of 5, and then they're responsible to make sure that everybody stays on track. Yeah.
And you mentioned goals a couple of different times, True North a couple of different times. Do you have a specific process or a way that you determine, what that next goal is, what that True North looks like for you? Is that something that you've defined?
Yeah. So I use something called an MVP process: mission, vision, principles, which is really values, but the principles piece with the MVP, I think, resonates with folks. And, mission is very simple, right? Inspire, empower, and transform individuals, teams, and organizations. Really, it's just inspire, empower, and transform. We'll see where it goes. Because 60 days in, I don't know what it's going to look like. I mean, it could end up flipping, and I'm open to that, right? Vision is kind of like the resume. Okay, if that's what we're doing, how are we going to get there? You know what I mean? Is it going to be workshops? Is it going to be in person? Could you build a center of excellence in West Michigan and have people, all of the things that you've got, and then, sort of the behaviors like we talked about, like, what do I need? What's success? The 10,000 steps, the working out, the diet, what's below the lines. Don't wake up in the morning and scroll on TikTok for 3 hours. Wake up, say your positive affirmations, and then get to things that are productive, and kind of do that on a quarterly basis. I think the mission is going to kind of stay constant for me, but all of the other things are going to change quarterly as things present themselves, right? I mean, the engagements that I'm having on the athletic side, along with kind of that commercial side with who we're engaging with, it might look different in Q2 or Q3. So those things will change, but it's a one-page document that can always at least reference, you know what I mean? And it keeps me on path. It's not just all up here.
I've heard different scenarios of once you get those things defined and your goals written down, that it's important to review them throughout the day because you're making decisions. And it's sometimes the decisions you make are maybe a little bit more spontaneous than they should be, and you're forgetting your goals. So attaching them to your desk, putting them on your phone or putting them in the car, it's just like throughout the day, just reflecting, okay, before I make this decision, let's just reflect. It's not that you forgot them, but it's just good to remind.
Yeah.
Is that something that you do, or it's just kind of like...
I need to be better about that. I have the ability to chase shiny objects, as they say, I'll be talking to my wife about one thing, and I'm putting together a career catalyst program for young professionals, and I'm bringing together speakers to do an 8-week series. Cool. And really excited about it. And I'll start working on that, and I get that going. And then this morning I had a meeting with somebody that's on the athletic side, and it's a whole different path. And I got home and I started talking to my wife about it. I'm doing this. And she's like, okay, let's just make sure we execute on this before we get to that. It's like, have you ever read the book? It's called E-Myth.
Yes. Yeah.
The visionary, the entrepreneur, and the technician. And it's just like, sometimes the technician goes, but sometimes the entrepreneur takes over, and there needs to be a balancing act there.
Yeah.
So,
that's my story. Is I was a technician and spent a lot of time just technical expert, understanding how, as an engineer, right?
Yeah,
understanding how things functioned, and then just started a business. Kind of got thrown straight into that whole E-Myth story.
Yeah.
But through the whole process, understood that I actually really like this business thing. And it turns out it's kind of just like an engineering problem that just needs to be solved, in which, you reframe it and then you can figure some of that stuff out. But it is something that I've had to be more intentional, sitting down, defining goals, saying, what's the next 10 years? What does that look like? You mentioned MyFitnessPal. It's kind of funny because I was just logging something right before you came in. It's something I recently started because of setting a goal. I've got a 7-year-old son. His name's Bennett, and he's starting to dribble his basketball. He's starting to get good at sport, or, he's learning. He's figuring this stuff out, right? set a goal that said I want to beat him at everything for the next 10 years physically. I want to be able to beat him. And I don't want him to come home or want me to come home and him to get home from school and him to say, hey, let's go shoot hoops. And he'd be like, no, I'm tired. No, I don't feel good. Or like, I'm exhausted. Right. So, and I noticed some of that stuff in myself already was like, yeah, I give it all at work, whatever, I'm going in and, not eating healthy, not doing other things to take care of my body. And then I get home and I am tired. Like I got to go to bed. I'm giving it all. My poor son, right? He wants to go out and play catch or something. Yeah. So just setting that goal has defined some different areas of my life where things have changed for sure over the last year, probably.
Right on. And I got to think, it's like, not to stereotype or put people, or professions in one particular category, but sort of having that engineering background and the lens that you just looked through. And I think you said something along the lines, it's just a problem that you need to solve and figure out. That's a great way to look at it, because I feel like sometimes while it's positive and I think I lead from the heart and I feel it's a good thing, but sometimes that can get you in trouble when you are dealing with shiny objects and you don't have the balance, you know what I mean? So, yeah.
Taking things back to your family a little bit, and you've mentioned your wife a couple of different times, and it sounds like she's a good sounding board and a good individual to have conversations with. I do with my wife as well. Yeah. I come up with 20 new ideas, in the morning, and she's like, okay, let's start with one, and let's attack it and figure out if it makes sense.
Right.
Can you tell me a little bit about her and your relationship?
Yeah. So, if I really think about, and I look at my life, there's so many things to be grateful for, right? My kids, my career, the lifestyle that we built. But when I really think about what am I the most proud of, or it's that relationship, because I can tell you, we met in 1996. We had our daughter in 1999. We've now been married for 25 years. And you want to talk about, consistency and intention and habit and empathy and all of these things it takes, and, just to live through that relationship and now be on the other side, candidly, and not to sound sappy, but I really feel like we're at the best place in our relationship now, better than we were. When I was a young 23-year-old guy, we just had a daughter. All my buddies are living in Chicago and San Diego, and we're dealing with bottles and all. And I probably didn't show up as the best version of myself, and I think we've both grown. And yeah, it's she's been my rock and a best friend, and yeah, it's we're going through life together and really excited for the next 30 years to come. So
is she going to be involved in the business at all?
Yeah, so we'll see how it evolves. She's she has a little side hustle, kind of a custom creations. So she makes some of my swag, like hats and those types of things. And right now it's kind of just a passion project. Her girlfriends will have 50th birthday or bachelorette party for their kids or whatever. She makes that kind of stuff. So she's been doing that stuff for the business. She's been working on Canva on some of the sort of, literature that I'm going to put out. And we'll see, she's open to it. I have this aspiration to start hosting some events, and that's what she does the best at. We're the ones that host the Christmas parties and summer type of thing. So that's sort of my vision. If this thing continues to build out and we start to bring like-minded individuals together in sort of a setting, I think that'll be a big piece. But for right now, she's kind of got her thing, and she's just there to support me emotionally and keep me from chasing shiny objects.
Well, yeah, and having a rock like that, and someone that's willing to jump in and support you and help you achieve the success in business is incredible. And I've heard it say before, but how do you achieve success in life? How do you achieve success in business? How do you grow a new business to, levels of success? And I heard one person say one time, be careful who you marry. And that was his business advice.
Yeah.
Is be careful who you marry, or make sure that you have a good relationship with your spouse, because you could see the flip side of that, right? If that doesn't work out, it doesn't matter your business. You're going to be pouring everything into your relationship. Yeah. And it's the opposite. It's taking from your business, or, drawing your attention away from helping grow a business, where if you have someone supporting you in the corner, they'll come alongside you and help you grow that together. It's like having a better half, right? It's kind of the idea behind that. So
it is. And it's just like, you know, you got to work on it. And sometimes my tank is empty and she needs to fill it. And likewise, you just, you know, it's that yin and that yang, and you need to figure out when you need to show up for each other. And, you know, so.
Yeah, you've alluded to this already, but I am curious what you're most excited about for the next 3 years. Like what are you most excited about looking forward?
You know what I'm the most excited about? I was watching Rick Rubin do an interview. It wasn't with the guy with the Diary of the CEO. Who was he? It was Jay Shetty.
Okay.
Rick Rubin, I don't know if you know who he is. He produced like the Beastie Boys music. And Rick's background, if you know anything about him, he doesn't play a musical instrument, doesn't know how to read music, and he's this big time producer. He started meditating when he was 14, and this quote that he said really resonated. And he's like, look, follow what's interesting. It might not make sense to you. The people around you might not understand it, and it might not make sense for them. But follow what's interesting, not because of what you think you're going to get, okay? But because it's interesting, and see where it goes. And I'm grateful and thankful that I'm in a place in my life that's what I.E. mindset is. It's trying to inspire and empower people, but follow what's interesting, meaning don't get stuck in it's going to be this workshop for this particular vertical and that's how we're going to do it. It might be something completely different. It might be a completely different vertical. It might be, might not be B2B. Maybe it's more B2C. Maybe it's coaching. It could be anything, but follow what's interesting. And that's really what I'm trying to do, is like surrender a little bit and just stay in love with the process and not the outcome. And I'm excited for that. So
yeah, big things to come.
Yeah.
I'm excited to follow on to Bill and everything that's going on there. And as you've reached this season in your life, if you had the opportunity to go back in time and talk to yourself in that spring season, what's one thing that you would tell yourself about the future, about the current situation, anything you would be willing to tell yourself?
First, I'd say, dude, relax a little bit. Like you're living way in the future. You're worrying way too much, and it can be a good thing sometimes. But worry, you're anxious if you're worried in the future. If you're depressed if you're thinking about the past. Live in the present. I'd say that a little bit, and I'd say trust your inner guide. Listen to yourself. I think use your imagination, create things, communicate them. That's what I'd say. Worry a little less. Live a little bit more in the present. Be thankful and enjoy the ride. Yeah.
Be in the present. I know that that's something that a lot of people need to hear. And it's not a common thing.
No.
So thanks for sharing that. And as we're working our way through your journey and where you've had the opportunity to get to today and what you're excited about in the future, I am curious on hearing your full definition of success, because I know that it has changed probably throughout your career. You had some situations where you felt like your back was up against a wall and you're like, okay, my definition of success right now is just get a paycheck and be able to, cover bills or be able to provide for my family. What is today your definition of success?
Yeah. It's almost like, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, so I'm gonna take a creative piece here and just say, I think there's success and then there's fulfillment. And it's like, success is kind of what you think you want, and fulfillment is what you're made for. And so I think success is if you feel fulfilled and maybe you're giving more than you're taking, right? I spent my whole life as trying to be a go-getter. If I can be a little bit more of a go-giver, that would be success. And probably the biggest thing is, how did you make people feel? Like leaving here, you might not remember everything that I said or where that I worked, but when I came in here, when I left and I shook your hand, how did I make you feel as a person? And I think that's important. So yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, man.
Thank you for sharing your definition of success, Bill, as well as some insights into your background and your story and what led up to that definition and why it means so much to you. Completely agree with the importance of making people feel that way and positive and being more of a go-giver. I like that than a go-getter. Both can be in combination, right? But the more that you get, the more you can give. But you brought up a couple of different things in the past that I have a lot to chew on after this conversation, and definitely a lot to think about. and appreciate your time today. So thanks for coming on the Engineered Success Podcast. It's been amazing.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Great facility, great setup. I'm definitely letting folks know in West Michigan that it's here, and great resource. And thanks for having me in, Stephen. Appreciate it, man.
Awesome, Bill. Thanks.
Yeah, brother.